Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Humanity Rising. I'm Leslie Southwick Trask, and I'm with Ubiquity University and this marvelous uh, enterprise, I think a starship enterprise based on sometimes Jim's background called Humanity Rising. And today's 291. So just think about that 291 days that we've been in conversation together, either through the after chat or through the chat in this in the program itself. We've been inside incredible wisdom and knowledge. And as I get ready each day when I'm going to host, I sort of look at the top of the news. What's going on in the world that I can create relevance for in this conversation. And that's a real it ain't so pretty some of the time. And so today the rioting and the tension in South Africa is front of mind for me. But also front of mind for me are the increasing evidence of the graves of young Indigenous children in Canada that are being revealed from residential schools. The thing that really boggles my mind is that we've known this for decades, and yet now it's being revealed. And that means that we're in a time and place where the veils are coming off, where the secrets that were held, where the mysteries that
George,
knew about were really powerful in now becoming aware in our consciousness. It made me think that, if we approach this turbulent time in the physical body and programming that has been inside of us for the last 2,000 to 5,000 years, and no, I'm not just going through the industrial era, I'm going way back when we descended from a golden era and into the bronze and then into the iron age, where we embodied in our physical species more and more toxicity, more and more programming that made Homo sapiens react and respond to the world in which we are now doing. That unless we clear that programming, unless we are awake to a new consciousness, we are not equipped to take this know-how that is being given to us around how we proceed with transformation. I believe that each of us knew what we were going to be facing when we made this incarnation. We knew that we would be the vehicles through which the most traumatic of our species era would be in play. And for us that want to know how do we interact with that knowing, whether we seek the shamanic path, whether we seek another form of spiritual path, what we're aware of is that we are bringing in blueprints of how we are here to enact a new type of species. And if we don't clear the programming, if we don't clear all of what's in this interior so that it's ready for the vibrational capability of a golden age frequency, we are simply going to extend the time of the trauma. We're going to extend the time in which the news items that I just referred to will just keep continuing. They'll just keep happening, and they will get more and they will get more. And by the way, they will anyway in many ways, but our ability to work with them and their ability to transcend them is within our capability. And so today I'm going to shift a practice. I'm not going to be working with the heart. I'm going to be working with the soul. And to do this, I'm going to be working with our third eye, that centerpiece right here in the forehead, where some would say is the space of consciousness, and where some would say is where the soul resides. And so as we go into this meditation, I'm going to ask that you place your focus on your third eye. Your third eye, which has the light, which holds the beautiful, magnificent frequency that we are being asked increasingly to bring into our being and into our interactions with others. So I'm going to give some instruction. I'm going to then move into the meditation with the soul, and then we're going to allow it to flood us with light. We're going to have some music in the background so that our soul can dance, the light can dance, The concentration is right here. We're moving it from here to here. So I want you just to sit back and relax. And I want you to take 3 really big cleansing breaths, and make a sound if you need to. Just clear out all those cobwebs. I want you to just experience you letting go of this body in which this light lives. Just let go of your toes, let go of your knees, let go of your thighs, let go of your hands, let go of your chest, let go of your neck, let go of your ears, let go of your cranium, let go. And now, as you take a breath in, bring it in through your third eye in the center of your forehead. Bring it in through there, and then let it radiate out as you bring in air through your third eye. Feel how it is radiating all around you, all through our aura and out beyond. Now let's just concentrate on how we are bringing in light and bringing out even brighter light. Well, my fellow light beings, here we go into a dialogue that's holding our light as we go deeper in finding truth. I'm going to introduce George Capanelli. He is the host of Dialogues, which is a series that he produces around penetrating issues and questions of our time and allowing that methodology of David Bohm and others to really transcend our thinking and our consciousness into a feeling and a knowing of what we are here to understand. George is an award-winning author, Emmy award-winning producer and director. He's co-founded Age Nation and Empower New Mexico and the Ageless Living series. He's an expert on societal, individual, and organizational change. And because of that expertise, he served as a consultant to a number of Fortune 500 companies, the public sector, nonprofits, and of course, he's a coach of many leaders. We are absolutely delighted to have on our stage today, George Capanelli.
Leading authors, experts, and activists come to explore some of the systemic problems of our time. Terrific panel tonight, and the process we're going to use is a process that is not discussion. Discussion is from the Latin word discutere, and it means to shatter into pieces. And as those of us know who talk a lot and are in a lot of discussions, that's often what happens. Instead, dialogue, from the Greek dialogos, means to arrive at understanding through reason. It involves an honoring of what each person says. It involves a listening so that what we can do at the end is to understand each other better and to work toward real harmony. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. As I say, a wonderful group of authors and experts who are listed on the website of this program. And at the end of it, we'll be back and have an opportunity to chat with you and answer some of your questions and see if we can't find a little greater understanding between us as well. So welcome to the dialogues. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce our guests, and for you to find out more about them, you can simply look at the Ubiquity site and the Humanity Rising site for additional details. I'm going to go across the top first. Heidi Sparks-Guber, me, of course, in the center, Sedina Caponelli, Celeste Kruger, Paul Levy, Dr. Larry Dawsey, Barbara Dawsey, Gordon DeViren, Terry Tillman, and Tom Eddington. So let's begin. Heidi, would you repeat the question that we framed the last time?
Yes, sure. So the question is, in the face of the seeming madness of our time, in which we humans seem to be compelled to act against our own best interests, we're seeing that everywhere. We're seeing that environmentally, politically, health-wise, and more. How do each of you respond in a way that brings us back to unity, or to sanity together, and back on track for a positive future?
Paul, I'd like to ask you a question based on something that you said during our last program. Obviously, you did a great job of defining Wetiko for us, and we'll get a chance to re-explore that. But one of the things you said was, if we don't understand what this virus of the mind is about, we're going to continue to destroy ourselves.
Right.
Say a little bit more about that, would you?
Yeah, sure. Well, the thing about this virus of the mind is that it's showing us the prime importance of the psyche in creating our experience of ourselves and of the world. And so what you see, one of the primary ways that the mind virus works is by distracting us so that we put our attention outside of ourselves and think the problem is out there or the solution is out there, where the origin of the problem and the solution is to be found within us, within the psyche. And so that's a very simple way of really translating, what I was trying to say, in that if we don't have the recognition of what is being shown to us by the manifestation of the mind virus, then we're just going to continue to be its instrument and to destroy ourselves.
Say just a little bit more about when you say destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
What is it about Wetiko that allows us to do that without being aware that we're even doing it?
Right. Well, the one way to envision Wetiko, it's an autoimmune disease of the psyche. And so the actual psychic system that is supposed to monitor invaders or pathogens gets actually sort of numbed out so that it just doesn't even recognize the very pathogen that it's supposed to monitor and to stop from coming into our organism. And so then what happens is that the pathogen, it insinuates itself sort of into our minds in such a way that we become unconsciously identical with it. So it actually impersonates us, and we think we're acting out our impulses, but we're actually like a puppet on a string. This mind virus is the one that's pulling our strings and acting itself out through us. in a way that's guaranteed to be destructive. And when that's actually collectively acted out in the greater body politic, like we see today, we're destroying the biosphere, the life support system of all of us.
Thanks, Paul. Let's just open the floor. Any questions from anyone for any reason about anything that was said last time or things you want to bring up this time?
Barbie, I have a question for you. Based on some things we talked about last time, I've been reflecting on it. When I told the story I told about going into a store in New York City, and you listened and you said, oh, this is so telling. We're going to be experiencing more and more of this, or it's likely that we will, because we have found ourselves going down the rabbit hole of a place that will take us nowhere good. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about that, if you don't mind.
No. I think what I would like to share is, in order for us to be able to hear somebody else's story, it requires a deep presence in order to be there. And all of us on this call certainly have our own many practices that we do. We have our favorites. And I would say one of the things that helps me come to this place of being there with attention to what someone else is saying, and also intention, so that I can move into this space. It is like holding, like it's a sacred container. So and right now, even though you and I are at a distance, I just so deeply can feel that the authenticity with which you asked me to share some thoughts. And one of the things that that helps me get into that place is to feel that experience within. And we know that when we look at Watiko, it just is, everything's out there. How do we drop into this place that is really a great gift for us? And one of the things that I do is I imagine like warm liquid flowing, starting at the top of my head and going all the way down, but it's an interiority to settle, because with the alarming things that are going on in the culture and society right now, it is easy to be on that treadmill of fear and anxiety and frustration. And the only way off of that is, being a cardiovascular nurse, is you step off the treadmill. You hold on and you step off and you get steady. And so that's what I would say right now is one way that we can do that is, how do we get to that place where we know we are sharing and we feel a deep, authentic presence? So thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to remember that we step off the treadmill long when we do it, and then we get steady.
Right. Yeah.
Larry.
I want to respond to apologize for being hoarse, which sort of makes my point. I think that there is no psychological factor that has a repercussion in us that does not spill off into the physical domain. I've spent my medical life, most of my adult life, practicing internal medicine. And we talk a good game like there are outside forces that are invading us. If you take the disguise off, almost all of this is aided or abetted or initiated in the first place by what's happening in the psyche. I mean, we talk about the mind-body problem, the mind-body issues. We're not making them up. Every aberration that we experience in the psyche has some sort of reverberation in the body. So I just don't think it's accurate for us to segment ourselves into psychological issues and physical issues. That is a bogus division in my judgment, and I base that upon uh, decades of research in internal medicine. So I just want to qualify early on that when we talk about Watiko, we really are talking about something that is inherently who we are. And this is not something that gets us by invasion from the outside by any means. It is, we make a path for it to enter and do its stuff.
Actually, if I could just say one thing, Larry, I so appreciate you clarifying that, because in my work, I point out that Watiko, it doesn't even exist. There's no such thing. There's no independent existence, and yet it can kill us. And that's the paradox, because that's actually pointing at the incredible power that we have within our psyche.
Yes.
I think, Larry, I'm going to agree with you, but probably requires more discussion. I've been teaching seminars for 42 years now, and the most practical thing I've learned that I present, and the way I say it is, where you look is where you go. My focus determines the result I call reality. And that focus, we've been teaching this metaphysically for decades. Now there's some biology and some science behind it. And even the quantum physicists are coming into agreement, and we're merging with the same, different language to say the same thing. When I was in my 20s, I was in a folk band in the days when folk music was big. We had an opportunity to do a pilot show for what was hoping to be sold as a TV series, which was very important to us. Would have rocketed our career and got us visible and made money. And part of it was filmed in a theater in St. Louis. And before the filming was to start, I went into the theater about an hour early to tune our instruments, because I was very close tolerant and OCD or something. You know, I would be the guy that would get it just right. And so there was a piano on the stage, and I had a banjo, and I tuned the banjo. I hit a note on the piano, hit a string matched the banjo string to it, finished tuning my banjo, put it on a stand next to me. In fact, it's sitting right behind me right now. And then I picked up one of the guitars and went through the same process. Hit a note on the piano, matched the string on the guitar with it. I got to the third string on the guitar, which is G. So I hit the G on the piano, and the banjo, which was about 6 feet away from me, sounded. And there's nobody else there. And I was freaked, like, what? You know, looked around, like, anybody here? Nobody responded. And I hit the G on the piano again, and the banjo sounded. And I thought, but that's weird, you know. So I picked the banjo up and I moved it about 12 feet away, and I did it again. G on the piano, the banjo sounded. I repeated that. I don't remember how far away I got the banjo, but it was a distance, maybe 20 feet, and I could still hear it. I later learned this is sympathetic vibration, is what it's called. And everything's vibration. So if I'm tuned to G, metaphorically, anything else out there that's got a G in it is going to resonate. And if it's got enough G in it, we're going to sync, we're going to harmonize. I'm going to see it, and I'm going to say that's reality. You know, the wall next to me has got a G in it somewhere, but it's got too many other vibration stuff, but there's some way to detect it would resonate with a G. I've never forgotten this. And to me, I think that's what you were saying, that, you know, it starts in here with what I'm vibrating. And what I'm vibrating is determined where my focus is, what I look at, what I say to myself, what I feel, and that vibrates. And it goes out there and it vibrates something else of like kind, and I notice it and I say, there's reality. But every one of us is vibrating something a little differently, and we describe our reality a little bit differently. And I've tested this in large groups and seminars, and in fact, you know, I have ways to demonstrate it, that we can be in the same room thinking we look at the same thing, and we describe it very differently.
It's great.
If that makes any sense. So.
Heidi, I bet you have a ton of questions.
I do, but Gordy had his hand up, and I just want to make sure
Oh,
he gets.
sorry, Gordy, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I want to come back to you, Paul, and I've shared with you before. You know, I was impressed. Gosh, in 1984, Willis Harman wrote a book called Global Mind Change, And what he said was virtually every global problem we now face was simply a mirror of our own interior state. And that's a powerful realization, because we're in a culture where we have almost an exclusively external view of the world. We're not really looking inward in terms of what are we projecting, who are we taking ourselves to be. I just wonder what could bring about a larger recognition that what we're seeing out there, the disharmony, the chaos, the ecocide, the fearful images of the future, that those are projections, and that somehow we have to come to some state of deep inner knowing and harmony and balance to change that. What in your experience brings about that shift from that purely external view to that self-recognition?
You're on mute, Paul.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, I thought I unmuted. Okay. Yeah, I just really appreciate the question, Gordy, because for me, what you're describing, I mean, that's to recognize this is like a dream, and a dream being where our inner process is actually expressing itself via the medium of the outside world. But then the question is, it's one thing for one person to have that realization, and then of course you have to stabilize it because it's so easy to forget. But the question is, how do we get that out, get that understanding out, so that a critical mass actually has this understanding, and then something in the collective unconscious shifts. And that is the question. And I just imagine we're all doing it in our own creative way.
Larry?
Well, I think part of the problem that everybody is alluding to, part of the problem is that we're, in spite of how we see ourselves, so much of our population is basically, and I hate to say it, but scientifically, utterly illiterate. These things that we're talking about collective consciousness and about knowing things at a distance, all of this weird stuff has been proved in scientific study after scientific study of being factual and repeatable. But yet you bring it up and people think, oh, that's just California woo-woo. I don't want anything to do with that. When in fact, the overwhelming evidence in scientific control studies is that there is such a thing as clairvoyance, telepathy, psychokinesis, and it is real and it is repeatable. Until we get to that point of seeing the magic factor in our own consciousness, I think we're stuck.
Tom, and then Heidi.
Yeah, in response to what Paul was just sharing, it's not lost on me that Wetiko is a mind virus, and we're living through COVID-19 and a virus, and I'm watching the unfolding of COVID-19 and the impact it's having on individuals, on families, on communities, on society as a whole, and it's proving to be a wonderful mirror for Wetiko. And it's allowing each of us to question how we experience reality, what's important to us, what we value. And particularly in the coaching work I do, so many of the executives I work with are finding in the last 15 or 16 months, they're questioning everything they thought to be true. And the work that I do around executive coaching, the first two questions I ask clients are, what do you believe and why do you believe it? And COVID-19 has provided us, in a very horrible way, an opportunity to question, what do we believe, what matters, why do we believe what we do?
Heidi, were you going to?
Yeah, I have questions for every one of you about the things that you said last time. So let me start, since you just spoke, I'll go to you. And when we were listening to you last time, you were talking about that your primary practice, I think you almost put it that way, was self-compassion. No, that in the face of, and you've done amazing things. All of us have been inspired by the way that you are committed to birthing this paradigm shift, publicly, visibly, in action. You're pointing to ways through the chaos, but I was struck that you said that your basic practice was self-compassion. And in fact, that's something that almost everybody pointed to in some way, was this self-compassion. And I'd really love to know a little bit more about what you mean by that. I could ask that of anybody here. I've been looking at it for myself. What do you actually mean by self-compassion, and how do you allow it to work?
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. For me, I look at what is the opportunity of being human and a life. And there are certain things that I think are fundamental to being human. One is to serve. The second is to learn. The third is to give. And the fourth is to create. And each of us, that's the journey of our lifetime. And for me, I've spent my entire life being of service to others, to be giving to others. And something that I have struggled with my entire life is what I'm calling self-compassion. How to be of service to myself, how to take care of myself. And it's in my 61-year journey, I'm feeling like I'm getting to the fringes of what that might actually look like, what that actually could mean. But it's still a very foreign concept to me. I don't feel like I'm equipped to have self-compassion. And that's the inner work that I've been focused on for the last 12 or 15 years, is to really understand what does self-compassion look like. How do I take care of myself and do it in a way that doesn't make me feel selfish, or how do I remove that zero-sum game that if I'm providing self-compassion, I can still have compassion for other. And that's the dance that I've been in for a number of years.
Thank you.
I wonder what's the difference between self-compassion and self-love?
I think they're different qualities. Fundamentally, the universe is love. And if we're separate from, or hold ourselves as separate from other, we can disconnect from the energy of the universe, which is love. But the self-compassion piece is, in our very human existence, the stumblings, the mistakes, the self-judgment all get in the way of self-compassion.
Terry?
Good question. I see compassion as an aspect of love, and co-passion. Passion, one of the roots of passion is suffering. The passion play. When I'm self-compassionate, I'm accepting of the suffering I have, not judging it, not resisting it. Doesn't mean I need to like it, but if I can come to that acceptance, this is a part of the human experience. It's where I am right now, and there's something in it for me, and it won't last forever, and let me find the lesson in it, and maybe I'll come out the other side even better. And if I can do that, that's, to me, part of loving myself. I love myself. I love myself enough to do that. There's other aspects of loving myself, many, the way I hold it, but the loving would be the big container context. Kind of the distinction I'd make with it.
I was struck before I'm sorry, Sedina, let me just, I was struck before when, Paul, you were talking about recognizing the dream, and I was thinking of two words, react and reflect. If I'm spending my life reacting to what I'm projecting outward into the world as if it were real and only real, and I'm not reflecting, then I'm forgetting the fact that I'm projecting the dream out there. And I think of that old expression, count to 10, remember? When we were kids, a lot of us were told, oh, count to 10 before you do this or do that. And I realized that if we were teaching children to count to 10 and to reflect rather than react, we could have a rather different world. Just a thought.
I'm sorry, can I just say,
Go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just going to say what you just described, that's Watiko, where we react instead of reflect. And the one thing I wanted to add about compassion, to have the recognition of the dreamlike nature, that we're having a shared collective dream, the energetic expression of that is compassion, because then you recognize, oh, well, we're all characters in each other's dreams. We're interconnected, interdependent, we're not separate. And the expression of that realization is compassion, both for others and for oneself.
Heidi, Larry, whoever.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that distinction. I see love as love, and you can have compassion for yourself. Loving for yourself is not quite of the same order. To me, love is the substance of which we're made. Compassion is the forgiveness for what we put in the way. So Forty called that mistaken identity. And I'll give you an example that I've seen lately since we've actually had this conversation. There's this person who's in my life often and who's always brings a sense of annoyance, of my not being heard, of having to restrain myself around that person. Certainly not fully expressed, am I? Recently, they invited themselves to come over, and I was beginning to sense that old withdrawal, that, pulling behind those feelings. And for the first time, as I've been contemplating compassion for self, that it has to start there. For the first time, that sensation brought a new observation for me. And that was that my resistance to that person was actually lack of compassion for myself for the way I was feeling about it. Usually I project that resistance onto the other, but I actually caught in flight in the moment that what was unforgivable in that moment for me was the fact that I had given up I had gratuitously bestowed my identity on something else besides who I am, right? And what happened is that as I was feeling that, as I was noticing that resistance, that discomfort disappeared completely, it evaporated. And as soon as it was seen, it just left. And in the space of that was this enormous love and joy that I know I am. And it was there fully and without any block. And what was great is that I had it for me, I had it for that person, I had it for everybody. It was like the kind of feeling you cannot contain. And that person, what's interesting is that without even having to make a choice or trying to restrain myself or control myself, what happened is that this full expression of love, the person noticed it and actually commented on this shift in the emotional presence right then and there. And their face lit up, and I lit up, and we began a new relationship together. I've known this person 15 years, and there was this whole new response that I know is the basis of going forward. And what is even more incredible is that since that happened, and thanks to stories that you all have told, you know, your story in our last conversation, Celeste, is a beautiful example of that. That once that's seen, that you have access to that again and again. It's like it's there for you, like riding a bike. And the bottom line, I mean, the punchline of the joke is that love is the substance of which we're made. We know that from the wise. You know, Sat Chit Ananda, you know, love, consciousness, and bliss is our nature. It's what we're made of. So that's the difference for me. It's not self-love. It's self-compassion, forgiveness for that which I have gratuitously put in the way of it. And that is what I'm made of. So that's my experience of self-compassion. But it's like you, Tom, I'm humbled by the fact that you've been working on this for so long. This is just, you know, I've studied this conceptually for decades. And only now is it actually becoming internal. It's something that spontaneously arises from who I am. So thank you.
Sedina.
Yeah, Heidi, thank you. What a beautiful catch midstream. I love that. That's fantastic when we can do that, and we can really be that aware. And thank you, everybody. I have to say, Barbie, that beginning of you know, your deep listening and the way you described all of that is, it's just, I really think that's where we need to go, all of us. I know for myself, compassion is a big thing, and it really bubbles up for me out of a praise deficit and a love deficit for millennia. You know, I'm sure it's in my cells, right? And teachers, parents, friends, you name it, when I was younger. And so the big thing for me is wholeness. It's that's where I get my compassion, is loving myself regardless of what I've done, what I want to blame myself for. And every day it is hard work for me to just keep letting it go and letting it go. And I do a lot of hugging myself. You know, I look in the mirror and literally just, hey, you know, you're okay. It's the way I get through the day. It's what I teach women. And it's shining that beauty from the inside out, seeing it, appreciating it within me, and then seeing that light in each person that I see. That's how I stay in compassion, because I can get irritated like you, Heidi. There's different things that I want to resist, somebody's opinion, the way, it doesn't matter. I've got so much judgment, you know, that I can carry, that I've carried for lifetimes. So if I can just see their light, and what I try to do is see the little kid in them. That's what really helps me, because everybody is just a child of God, really. That's how I look at it. And I love, Larry, you always come back. It's so great to the goodness is inherent, you know, in all of us. And it's so true. That's what Heidi just said, Tom, Terry, you know, Celeste kicked it off with every single thing Gordy was saying too. It's really the depth of ridding this fatico that Paul is constantly reminding us of, ways we can interconnect. I think it's first has to begin with me. Has to begin with me. I have to love me for all of it, and then I can see everyone, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, you know. Who wants it all? If it's all light, you're not going to see the dark. Is something that Larry said too. So thank you. I don't want to go on too long. I really appreciate being here, and every one of you are just such lights. Thank you.
Larry?
Well, one of the reasons I have been intrigued for about 50 years in the practice of internal medicine is ministering to very sick people, some of whom live and some who die. And I don't think it's possible to be a decent physician without having compassion for somebody who's about to die.
Yeah.
And that comes through to the person on the sick bed as at no other time. There's a connection that although I might not be able to see you through this illness, I really do care about you. And I care what happens to you after you die. And when this comes across, that's true compassion. People don't have to define it. They know what it is. They sense it. And that's one thing that makes this terribly difficult practice of internal medicine so damn complicated. You may be dealing with a son of a bitch in real life. Well, all of that goes by the by when you're standing at the bedside and somebody is really suffering.
I would
Can I
like
just say one thing real quick, and that is with the compassion, with reference to Watiko, it's the Watiko, it dispels and dissolves Watiko better than anything. So I just wanted to name that compassion is the medicine.
It's beautiful.
Barbie, were you going to say something?
Yes, we've all spoken about it and even used the word. I think one of the first things in regard to moving deeper into ourselves is to notice our own suffering. And when we start there and name it, and then find ways to deal with our own suffering, then we are open to other people's suffering. And when we do that, then we are able to truly, and Sadina, this is what I heard what you were saying, is you try to find the light in people. And this is that sympathetic joy where we can celebrate someone else's successes. And we just are thrilled with it. We're not envious. We're not angry that they succeeded, but it is this joy. And when we do that, then that allows us to move into that equanimity. And this is where all of us doing our different practices of just that strong back and soft front, where we can take in all the suffering, but we don't get swept away by it, is in and out. And it's the loving kindness that goes with all of this too. It's not loving or kindness here. And the beauty of joining those is one word. There's no alienation there. And when we recognize that, it's just, it's just pure joy.
She's a nurse.
And we're all grateful that she is, that's for sure.
Marty,
Yeah, so I'm noticing a movement in our dialogue, and we began with a question, and Paul with the projection of a world out there that is clearly mad, and something that makes us stand back and go, what the hell is going on out there? But the movement, the shift that I've been seeing is a movement from out there to in here deeply. Tom, starting with you, with self-compassion. I remember once that there was a joke about a Chinese puzzle that when you put in the last piece, it blows up. And the last piece is our own personal self. I mean, we have these whole systems, worldviews, everything that's out there, and the one piece that is most indispensable to put in is our very, very personal, unique, deep, whole human self. And when we come to occupy that, when we come home to the personal, and by the way, that's very different from individualism. I mean, it's been said that the fundamentalism of modernity consists of materialism, reductionism, and individualism. And individualism is that notion of a separate self, of a fragmented reality. But the personal and present, when we are personally present, when we are truly home in ourselves, in our most deep human selves, in our hearts, in all our capacities, it's a very different world. We're not in a place of struggle, of war, of conflict, of resistance. So I just wanted to reflect back that I'm seeing that movement, and I'm very much appreciating it.
I love that. And I'm experiencing it too. You put words on something I could feel but didn't quite have language about. I think what I experience right now as I've listened to us, and I'm listening and watching these little postcard squares on the screen, is this settling in. It almost feels, I'm almost feeling like this is a devotional practice we're doing right this moment. I hear the cadence of our voices shifting from rational thought that's responding to data points and into a place of more like a flow with successive approximations as we're adapting to each other. And that's what happens inside of my experience. It's very hard to articulate for me, but it's like I don't know if this matches for all of you, but if you have experience in any religious tradition, of any of the major traditions, sometimes there's a droning that comes with prayer times. It almost doesn't matter what the words are anymore. And you might be using a book, or you might be using ancient texts in your head. It doesn't really matter. But that's what this begins to feel like to me. And I appreciate it tremendously. Because here we are in cyberspace. And yet, you know, I have said this to you before, but I really mean it. I really mean it. I heard you say it, Heidi. I find myself reflecting on the things you all are sharing and saying regularly, not by will, but by air bubbles that surface. And I'm so grateful. It's like I have a little tribe to travel with. And not only a little tribe, actually a great mind, a deep heart tribe. And we haven't even all met each other in person yet. So blessings. Thank you for that.
Right.
Barbara?
Recently, within the last 10 days or so, I read a new poem for me, Barbara Crooker. And a poem that caught me was the title of it, Sometimes I Am Startled Out of Myself. And so, Celeste, I think that is some of what you were saying there, is that there are so many expressions of that. And then when we feel something or we wake up to something, it's just like we're startled out of ourselves. And today was a day of errands, and I was startled out of myself just in 4 days of not going out to see iris in bloom, to see Russian sage in bloom, to see these yellow Santa Fe roses in bloom, and all of this stuff just opening up moment by moment. And then I had to run errands in a couple of stores, and I was startled out of myself to not encounter anyone without a mask. And so there was a respect. There is something that there was a quality. Of course, I was aware of it within myself, but it was almost like there was a quality with people going out in public, but wearing their masks and a respect. So it was precious. Thank you.
I just had something pop in. I've been watching the screen and kind of going into a meditative daze. And I have a friend, Neil Rogan. Some of you may know him. He's got this facility for saying the wisest things in the shortest sentence. But we were talking at lunch one time, and he said, I think this is it. He said, there's 6 billion ways to say everything, but there's only one everything. And there's only one everybody. And as that came in, I'm glancing at these tiles, this gallery view with all our different faces and environments, surrounding colors and all this, but I saw it as one.
See, I can't cover that up because
The all one, I think you know what I'm saying. This is one of these things that doesn't translate into words very well. But you're me, you know, it's like, how weird is that?
no, it's the one.
That's so sweet, Terry. I really love that. You know, what I'm feeling is the possibility for joy and love in the midst of disaster, in the midst of anything, is what we're all talking about. And it's just, again, coming back and strengthening ourselves with what we know to be the truth within us, and to remember around, you know, that we're one. Well, you just said it, you know. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, we're approaching the conclusion of our time together, at least in this dialogue, and I just want to say that it's always a gift to have us gather and to share what we share. And if there is a living demonstration of shared understanding, for me, we've just both demonstrated that and experienced it, and I'm really grateful. So until next time, blessings. See you soon.
George and Sadina made it.
Yes.
Right?
Just by a skin, as they say.
And a while ago, Larry and I went to the tap on the after chat dialogue,
Uh-huh.
and we spoke to a lady named Anna from Belgium.
Oh, wow.
And it was 5 o'clock her time.
Where is our
Matt sent something yesterday, and that's what I went into.
I asked them to resend it this morning to everybody, and I didn't see it come in.
George, you guys are live on the broadcast. If
Okay.
you want to follow up from the conversation.
Great.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you, Richard. As those of you who are listening may not know, we've had just a rash of internet problems this morning. So it's delightful to be back with you, and we're delighted to answer any of your questions or to comment on your chats. So let's see.
I think, hi, George and everyone.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi. I think that what's really emerging in the chat is an understanding that this virus that we have of multiple forms, Bronco, Corona, and others, are in fact giving us opportunity to come into a different awareness of who we are and how we live in this world. And my sense as I look at the chat is some of the practices. I mean, I think Heidi, you shared a beautiful practice that you used in terms of self-compassion and forgiveness of oneself, and what you did in real time. I think that this I know from our Humanity Rising group is that they are very intellectually full a great deal of the time, but it's the practice of what one does in those moments that is always the area of most intrigue. So, you know, the firm spine and the soft front, I mean, those are all techniques that you use and have come by, honestly, in terms of your evolution. I think that these are some of the things that people would be most excited to hear about.
So Leslie, you're asking whether or not there are other practices that people on the panel would like to share. Is that what?
Yes. Are there other practices that bring us into this awareness, this challenge of the mirror effect, that the interior, the interior landscape gets projected onto the exterior landscape, and that then fuels back the interior landscape, and we get inside a mirror refractal. And so how do we break that mirror refractal that we find ourselves in?
Beautiful question. Yeah.
Barbie?
Lovely question. One of the practices that we've all been sharing here is, what does it mean when we get into coherence with someone else? And incredible organization, Heart Math, they've done so much research on this, and their heart breathing exercise. And it is, rather than shifting just to breathe in and out, to truly put your consciousness, your attention and intention in your heart space, wherever you want to call it, where your heart is, or metaphorically in the center of your chest, but to practice the breathing of 5 breaths in slowly and 5 out. And then do that for a while to feel your own interiority, and then breathe that and send it out to others. So like people on this call, that we're in that heart breathing space together. Thank you.
One of the things that I find that is really helpful is if I do not react to something that is occurring outside of me, and I give myself a chance to feel in the silence what's going on. And oftentimes that gives me a perspective that I would not have had if I just jumped into a reaction. So that's one of the ways that I can separate the internal dream from the external dream that I may be projecting.
Yeah. I think Terry had his hand up first.
We've had conversations. I think all of us do some form of a meditation, or I call it a spiritual exercise. But it's a regular practice of going inside. And then the way I've learned this in language is to work with the light. I would look through my life, and I have a few credentials, blah, blah, and results. But anything I've done of consequence, I would say I didn't do. It was bigger than I could have, personality, ego, me, could have done. And so one of the practices I have is to send the light. Like if there's a situation or a person or an adversity that I'm challenged with, or I'm judging, which is too frequent, but I put it in the light, recognizing that there's a higher ability, consciousness, source, whatever, that knows better than this how to deal with it, and let it go. And then watch. And more often than not. And then I ask myself, someone else asked me this one time in the midst of my righteousness, would you rather be right or loving? And the answer was obvious. I'd rather be loving. I got to work on that more, And so in this COVID thing, I can get very positioned. I've researched, I've studied out of that. I can got a point of view. At the end, and I learned critical thinking at college, a good college, supposedly. But one of the things that I didn't get at school that I took forward from there was, at the end of my critical thinking, what if I'm wrong? And that I switched to, okay, let me look from another point of view, instead of positioning, and separating.
There are 20 people that put questions.
Yeah. Sadina, you were going to add.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leslie. What a great observation that you had too. Well, I have a lot of little techniques, and I think what I find is that I have a tendency, like all of us, to want to deny or disassociate when something comes up that I'm having a little issue with. So the best way for me is to connect with my body, which is the home I'm occupying while I'm here. And I do that best with EMF or emotional freedom technique, EFT, just simply by disengaging that fight or flight, sequence. So if I'm in a hurry, I don't care if I'm walking or wherever I am, I'll just sort of tap on my collarbone. And sometimes if I'm sitting, I like to rock so that the inner child knows I'm here. And this is a very personal practice I do myself. I'm loving to share it. And just, saying, I'm enough, it's okay, or I'm afraid, yeah, I don't feel good right now. Whatever is up, and acknowledging it in the body releases it. And actually, the acupuncture points will release this energy. And it's really a physical phenomenon that we go through, of course, when we're in fear. So that helps me a great deal.
Mm. Yeah. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie, and thank you all. One of our colleagues who wasn't able to join us this morning, Michael Nagler, we all have been in conversation with Michael over the last year on his film, The Third Harmony, which I had a chance to work with him on. And there were lots of chats this morning about Mother Nature and about world peace. And for me, that framework of the third harmony, of harmony with nature, harmony with each other, and harmony within ourselves, is a framework that I use on a daily basis. Just what am I doing today around the self-compassion piece that we talked about? What am I doing today in my relations with those people in my life? And what am I doing in relation to nature and Mother Earth? And so for me, that's part of my daily practice, having that ongoing dialogue and intention of the three harmonies.
Beautiful.
Larry? Oh, I'm sorry, Heidi. Go ahead, Heidi.
Yes, it's a beautiful question, Leslie, and there are many, many practices, and I've been learning from our colleagues here on the screen in this dialogue that we've reinforced and shared so many of these. One of the most basic ones for me is in a sense, our senses are our doors to perception, and to real perception, to perception of what's really there. And listening is a very powerful one for me. It's where Barbie mentioned this earlier, this idea of full and open listening, but even going into the sound of the voice. The example I gave with my friend who invited himself over, the first thing I noticed was that I already had ideas about us associated with our voices. And by just extending the listening out, and very much like what George was talking about, keeping this very wide open, unidentified receptivity to the sense of listening. Suddenly, it's amazing. You can hear in the sound of the voice everything that's being trying to be said. In that, it's never what the words are saying. It's always something deeper. Then it goes deeper even. It becomes, the voice is something that we all share. And we have this false identification with the sound of the voice with a person. And what it allows you to go is even deeper. So that's just one of many practices that anyone can do at any time. You go out in nature, and one of the first things that happens is your listening gets very large and very deep, and it stops the mind and just opens the heart. And all you did was listen to your listening, right? And the final thing I say about the process of this dialogue, we very much entered into this dialogue, as someone said, some of us have never met in person. And we entered it with a willingness to listen deeply and to be heard. So to me, dialogue is the certainty of being heard and of hearing what's really being said. So the practice even of seeing this conversation we had, I can't almost believe that I was there when we were recording that part of it, because I heard so many more connections that I did not hear at the time because I was in this semi-identified state, right? So it's a constant practice, and it's why dialogue is so very important as a practice with others, is to be able to hear what's really being said to the extent that you can at that
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Heidi. Larry, someone on the
Great,
chat
Heidi.
asked if you would say a little bit more about the powers we have within us.
Well, I have taken another approach, which emphasizes not the powers we have within, but the way in which our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings penetrate the world. It's an exteriorization of what we usually call our inner life. I grew up on a remote farm in the center of Texas, and being alone in nature has always been very precious to me. And I don't sense aloneness in the way that most people think about it. For me, my entire being is infused in nature and is part of nature. To this day, I go out, we live on the side of a mountain, and the most precious time for me is sitting on the back porch, looking at the mountainside, the pinyon forest, and becoming one with that. In other words, I don't do anything to increase the strength of my personality. I want to give it up. And I want myself to become a part of nature. I don't know where that comes from, except growing up in nature. So for me, becoming myself involves becoming one with everything else. I wrote a book about this once called One Mind, which goes into some of the techniques and explanations of why I think this is a compelling way to view one's place in the world. I've never been attracted to the psychology of improving and strengthening the personality. To me, I think that reverses the trajectory of what our best efforts ought to be pointing toward.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Mm.
One of the observations I made is that I lived on the Camino de Santiago for 10 years. And what I found was really fascinating in my own first walk was from Lisboa to Finisterre, which was about 880K, is that at the very beginning, everybody's identified as who they identified by personality, to your point, Larry. So who are you? Well, I am this. What have you achieved? And to your point, Terry, these are my credentials. That's the kind of way in which people self-identified. And about halfway through, they started to identify as where they were in their journeying of reflection, where they were from, what country they represented, all of that shifted to a very different sense of who they were. And actually, by the end, there was very little dialogue. There was because the emptiness that occurs in the walk as you empty and empty and empty and empty, that you then, when somebody says hello, you just go, hi. That's it. I'm done. But I would also say that the sharing back and forth that is nonverbal, that is all about the light that you spoke to, Terry, that communion of soul and spirit was so vibrationally high that the voice took away from that vibrational communion. And as they say in the world of the Camino, the real Camino begins when this one ends, meaning you open yourself up for the next one that you will be undertaking. So the walking nature of that movement through life has some very powerful moments of realignment, being one with nature. In fact, I took my iPod thinking I was listening to music, and that was fine for the first day. And then I realized I didn't want to listen to anything but what was around me. And so I just wanted to comment about that technique that I experienced, and how it feeds very much into the work that you are doing and the techniques that you're sharing.
It's
Beautiful
interesting.
techniques that you just shared. Thank you. Wow. And from experience, from beautiful experience.
It's
Yeah.
interesting, Leslie, that it's said that less than 10% of communication happens verbally. And yet the majority of us spend so much of our time in verbal communication and not in that space that you're talking about. So it's a really wonderful reminder. Thank you.
There's a practice that comes out of Japan called forest bathing. I don't know if folks are familiar with it, but in a forest bathing practice, you work with each of the senses as you're out in nature. And working with the auditory sense, you're instructed to just notice what you hear. And then you're asked to notice what's the loudest thing that you hear. And then you're asked to notice what's the softest thing that you hear. And it's a remarkable practice of just noticing what you notice and just paying attention with your attention focused on different things. And it's a wonderful way of, if you're out in nature especially, but it doesn't have to be nature. Work through each of your senses and just notice and put your attention on particularly with the auditory, what's the loudest and what's the softest thing that you hear.
Beautiful.
There's a technique in medicine called using a stethoscope. And I will never forget when I was first introduced in medical school, the technique of listening to a heartbeat. And it was something you couldn't hear with your ears. It had to be modified and cranked up with this tool. And I remember being stunned at the heart murmurs and the clicks and the pops that you learn to pick up in physical diagnosis. And to me, this opened up a whole new world. I mean, you may not think that the heart sounds are very important, but you wouldn't be alive without them. And for me, this was tapping into another dimension, which was invisible, but yet absolutely essential for life. And for me, there's a deep lesson there. And today, although I've retired from practicing medicine, I still have my stethoscope behind my desk, hanging from the wall. I just can't be too far away from it. You know. So there's this whole world of crucial, barely audible sounds which contain an important lesson.
Yeah.
Wow.
It reminds me of being a mom, because you can hear your child no matter where they are, no matter how deep asleep you are. And, my husband would say, well, how did you hear that? I just said, it was really loud to me. In other words, I mean, I think when we're tuned into a frequency, which we are with those we love, that when they make any kind of sound, it vibrates in our frequency. And so we wake to respond. So I think I love, Larry, that you have a stethoscope, which speaks to such as a powerful conductor of sound, and reminds you every time you look at it, the brilliance of what those heartbeats are. I think it's fabulous. Wow. Got to give me one of them.
Yeah.
As we're talking about the listening, I think that that's one of the joys that I have, because I am an avid needle pointer. And to sit with a piece of whatever it is that I am stitching and creating is the listening that happens. And on our dialogues, we have spoken about suffering. And that is another way where we can look at whatever we're doing to put our full intention there and listen to the interiority and the shift and the just clarity that comes with words that come out of it's seemingly nowhere, but we've allowed ourselves to shift into another state of consciousness to truly enter into a deep eye space of presence.
Yeah.
Mm.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know, that's why sort of the sewing circles and the knitting circles is where the activity of focus here allows for a different kind of interaction here. And so, yes. And so doing it personally oneself is, I see very meditative, like incredibly meditative.
Yes.
And you got something to show for it.
It reminds you, it's your stethoscope. You have an actual artifact of that practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Larry, I want to
Yeah,
go
it's
back to your-
interesting that Barbie combined the listening with suffering. The original meaning of the word suffering meant allow to be. Suffer the little children to come unto me means allow them to come.
Right.
And so suffering, the way we're talking about, is actually the real meaning of it, which is to allow it to be, not to stuff it or stifle it, but allow it to be there in that practice. And so the suffering we're talking about is actually a great practice, is to allow it to be as it's happening.
I want to go back to your stethoscope, Larry. Great metaphor. But it's also, I want to learn what you talked about. So often you touched my heart. That was hard.
Yeah.
We use the heart as a reference, and people know what it is.
Yeah.
Even though we don't articulate it that well. But I think you're on. Well, I don't. You're onto something. I have a friend who's a doctor of Chinese medicine, and he reads my pulses, and he told me there's 9 of them.
Yeah.
And he tried to show me what he's reading. Well, I can feel one beat.
Yeah.
I said, how did you get to where you can just make those 9 distinctions? And he said, he said, I got a Bible and I put a piece of my hair under one page because the page is thin. I'd feel it to see how to feel it. And then I'd do 2 pages and then 3 pages. And he'd work his way up. And I don't remember how many pages he got to where he could still feel the hair to develop the sensitivity. So I love metaphor. This could be a teaching metaphor for sure.
I love that, Terry.
I'm serious. I'd like to do this. I mean, go out and buy a stethoscope.
It's terrific.
I think you're so right, Terry. What you just said about sensitivity, that's what I'm hearing everybody saying. And I really think we need a little icon, something in the form of a stethoscope to represent this group. It's a terrific symbol of what we're talking about. And what this all means to me is a slowing down. Here we have this chaotic situation in our world with things unraveling, and our deepest reality is unity, and that's what we're all coming back to as we slow down, as we do what Heidi and Tom and George, everybody, Barbie, what you all were just saying. It's a slowing down. And your wonderful comments, Leslie. Just thinking about that, I've wanted to do that Camino walk for so long. What a beautiful experience. It's sometimes we have to force ourselves to put ourselves in a situation to let go.
Yeah.
We're being put in it, I think, right now. So what are we going to do? This is a time for us to let go of all of that clinging, holding on to the personality, and just being a lot more quiet going in. So I'm loving this and learning a lot from everybody. I definitely want a stethoscope, tell you that.
Barbie, I also think that when you talked about, the process that you go through with your hands, and you're also referring, I think, to a different kind of listening. I mean, in work that I do, which isn't here, in the work that I do with sculpting, with wood and stone and different things, when my hands are occupied, there is a listening that happens that has nothing to do with sound. It calls up intuition, it calls up insight, it calls up that space between the notes where so much happens in life. And as we've all been saying, some of the problem is that we talk over it, or we act over it, or we do all kinds of things that don't give us the opportunity to hear between the notes, which has nothing to do with sound. But I think it was Rubinstein said that that's where the real music happens, you know, so.
And George, just to follow up on what you were saying then, is when I am doing my stitches, there are certain canvases where I don't even take them out to work on them, because I have to be in such a special, quiet, listening space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I will rip a hole into every stitch I take because of a silk scrim.
Yeah.
And so that's it. It's that intuitive knowing and literally becoming at one with that piece that begins to speak to you.
So beautiful.
Leslie, are we getting close to the end?
We are about just to come to a wrap, and I just wanted to close my story and then this circle. I listened to the land as I walked, and I think that's what you say, that intuitive feeling. And I only walked onto one piece of land that was not on the path that was right beside it during my time. And it intrigued me. It had a vibration that really called to me. And then when I came back to Canada after my walk and knew that I was about to shift, but I didn't need to know what it was. I just knew that that part of my life was over and a new part was about to begin. I found, downloading my photos, that piece of land. And on the next photo was a for sale sign that I did not know I had taken, because I was filming the sheep on the terrace in the background. So of course I emailed. I went back a month later and bought the abandoned farm and the farmhouse, and to turn it into an albergue and international cafe.
Wow.
It's listening. It's listening. It's like, how did my psyche knew that I needed to have that for sale information, even though it did not register at the time that I was taking it. So it's I just wanted to comment on how magnificent you have taken us into that space of deep listening, of awareness, of how we can, the techniques and practices we can use in this moment as we're being asked to transition to a new type of civilization, and equipping us for making that happen. And so to close this circle, what I would like to do is just for you to give one word each that's sitting in your mind as we close, that will sew up this circle. And I'm going to start with you, Tom.
What showed up for me when you asked that, Leslie, was love.
Barbara and Larry?
For me, it was being.
Unity.
Sedina?
For me, it's oneness.
Terry?
If I only get one word, it would be love.
Heidi?
Gratitude.
George?
Authenticity. And Leslie, I just want to remind our viewers and those who are listening that we'll be back in September.
We will be with you in September, absolutely. And we want to make sure that we join after chat. After that will be in the link. My word is peace. That's the word that comes to me. So thank you, each and one of you, for such a beautiful, well, I think we've had like, a full course meal. I mean, we had the video, and then we had, the real chit chat in this room. And so it's like, how about a beautiful morning? Thank you so much. And I'm now just going to introduce, so thank you to this circle.
Yeah.
Just to let our audience know that tomorrow is going to be another amazing day on biomimicry. And Hugo Angelo is going to be taking us into the evolution of biology and how our biological systems are changing and how nature is a reflection of that change as we too, as a species on Mother Earth, are evolving. So Hugo is a masterful healer and a phenomenal artist and a man of great wisdom. And he has gathered together a really intriguing panel that is part of our master in regenerative action. So all of you out there who are part of our first responder team of regeneration for the planet, this is another day of excitement for all of us. So thank you on behalf of Humanity Rising and Jim Garrison. Thanks for being with us and have a wonderful, wonderful next 24 hours.
Leslie.
Too.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see if we can get the.
Wow.
So where's the link?
It's at the bottom. They shared it right there. It's now further up. Let's see. I'll put it in. I think this is it in the chat. That's what somebody just put up, and that might be it.
That's right. And it's if the passcode is 919541.
Yep. That's it.
Hand me the pen.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay,
Leslie.
closing the meeting.
Thank you so much.